the thesis, if you want to call it that, which is really an academic term, of this evening, is one that is not particularly well known, and that could be in some circles the occasion of controversy. And maybe for that reason it's particularly good if we don't have a house full of people, because there are only so many of you that can carry the controversy out instead of others, and that will be helpful. Also, I want you to tell you, I have a little different display of books here. We had the big original deluxe edition of the Red Book here last time, but I thought I'll show you that there is also another, a much cheaper and usually much more beat up edition, but it is still the entire Red Book, but without the pictures. And that, of course, is a great difficulty, but the textual material is all there, and from what I could see, I didn't call London, but I should call Dr. Shandasani. I think there are even portions in this edition that are at least difficult to find in a great big one. And what this is the Red Book, Liber Novus, a reader's edition. And the reason I bought this book was because a good friend of ours, member of our congregation at long distance in Illinois, flew up here in order to hear some of my lectures on the Red Book at that time, and he was carrying the big Red Book with him on the airplane, I am sure, to the evident consternation of the airplane crew and all that. Fortunately, this is not the plane that went down with 60 people in it just recently. Otherwise, we would probably be taken to the unholy Inquisition already. You know, but so that's not right. But anyway, I said, well, look, buddy, there is a much easier edition of this book, and I'll get it for you, and then you won't have to carry that great big one with you. And this is the one, it's called the Reader's Edition, and everything textually is there. So if you want to read the text at any income, this is a very good place of doing it. And it's, you know, it's sort of like those cheap Bibles that that you used to find in motels, especially if you went there maybe for other reasons than Bible reading, you know, but maybe like sleeping, you know. And in any event, you know, they are always sort of, you can bend them and all of that, Gideon Bibles, but this is a little bit like that. But all the material is in there, and if you are interested in the book, or even to look up something that you may have may wanted to remember, this is a very good book to have it, and it's of course a great deal cheaper than the big book. This is, as I had last time, one volume of the Red Book, which consists, let's see, of how many? I think of 6 volumes, something of that sort. And in it you have both the printed version and much of Jung's own handwriting. Very nicely put together books, and it's just called Black Books from 1913 to 1932. Now, I didn't bring it here just to flash it around and not tell you a little bit about it. What this really is a book of observations and notes that Jung made while writing the big red book. So it is definitely related to it, but it is not the same. And therefore, those who are really very interested in that material might find it important. And it has in it both the handwritten notes of C.G. Jung and the printed version of the text. Much of it is very interesting, but I would advise that if you are interested in this material, that you first avail yourself as much as you can of the Red Book, and then this can act as a supplement to that. The third book that I have here will be of useful to you only or primarily when I utter the heretical and in every way strange message that I want to really utter today, and that is about the nature and the character and in many ways the source of H.P. Blavatsky's work. Now you know that we have a little what do we call it, a book club here on every once a month on last Thursday night, and I have brought this matter up in a roundabout way earlier this month at a book club. But now, since then, I have acquired what I feel additional information, both direct and contextual, so I thought it will be useful if I bring up this issue. But depending on your discretions, it is by no means necessary that you trumpet this message to the world, because, as I say, it might, in some circles, it might cause controversy, and while at my age, and this point in my career, I'm not afraid of controversy. It would probably be best not to, until we are able to pursue this subject further, it would probably be best not to stir up too many embers of theosophical fire. And the reason for that being that I joined the Theosophical Society. I was actually on paper a member when I came here already in 1952 and 53. And so in that period of time, if you listened to the speakers, if you had discussions with very, very sweet, very darling old members who were here, we had more than 100 people in this lodge who attended meetings quite regularly, then let's say this is what you usually heard. If you said, ask them, or if you didn't ask them, so what is theosophy? They would have said it consists of the teaching about evolution, reincarnation, and masters. And that's pretty much all they knew or all they were willing to disclose. Now, while conditions have changed a little bit, I think this sort of 19th century version of the message of H.P. Blavatsky. I'm not even going to say the theosophical message, Blavatsky's message. The 19th century version of Blavatsky's message is by her own will and her own recorded words in need of a good deal of amendment. I don't mean actually changing, but amendment. And one of the interesting points of that is that in his own way, without referring to Blavatsky or to the earlier occult teachings, C.G. Jung has made that amendment already quite early in his own career, but people didn't recognize it. And it's like this. The Theosophists, quite understandably, under the circumstances, became devotees, at least of the word, if not the scientific concept of evolution. Or, you know, we mentioned what the preachers like to call evolution, you know. And then, let us say, along came, you know, not so terribly much, after all, H.P.B. died right before the turn of the century. And then C.G. Jung came forth already with various pronouncements, various writings. And one of the probably earliest, or at least earlier ones, was that the human being, Homo Theosophicus, that the Homo Theosophicus has one big problem. And that one big problem is that he or she is not whole. So that if we are looking for our own deficiency, our own problem, what's really eating us, it is that we are not whole. We are partial. We have parts that are missing. Now that you can't put it much more crudely. And what is that? Well, that is primarily the understanding that we have misinterpreted, or at least only partially interpreted, the various statements in the early theosophical books wherein our process within which we are engaged is evolutionary, and to the extent that we are not fully apprehending or implementing our theosophical or occult philosophy, the reason for that is that we are looking for the advancement of our own evolution. Now, this was not the position of H.P. Blavatsky, and I will show you, at least in broad outline form tonight, as to what her position was, and it has not been the position which the various theosophical societies have proclaimed now for more than 100 years, but something else, a little variety on the theme. Now, what am I talking? First of all, let's jump again to C.G. Jung. Here was C.G. Jung, born in 1875, as we mentioned, the foundation of the Theosophical Society, and fairly soon thereafter, he was still a young doctor working at as an intern at the Burghölzli Hospital near Basel in Switzerland, big mental hospital, as a psychiatrist, and that he in turn fairly soon said, you know, we have all these people here whom we consider crazy. No, he didn't use that term. I'm sure he was more polite than that. But you know, we have all these people here who are suffering from various seeming debilities, over nervous or over anyway, a nature of abnormality, and what's really wrong with them is something that we are not really talking about much. Now, I'm not channeling Carl Jung, you know, but that was the instead what we are. What we are neglecting is that the root of the problem of the overwhelming majority of these people is not what we think it is, not that they have not evolved properly or haven't been educated properly, but that the real problem is that they are not whole, they are not one. And so the way he explained that is that the human has within himself, herself, sort of part self. In fact, that term has been used. And they in turn has been called complexes. It's a word that is still used in psychiatry, and otherwise, you know, you have this kind of a complex, that kind of a complex. And that these complexes act autonomously. That's the term that he used. Now, autonomously, they're acting on their own, whether we like it or not. You know, so that this is the real problem. Yet we try to ascribe the difficulties, especially difficulties in consciousness of the human race, to something else, to not having evolved enough. No. So what do we have here now? If we take these statements more or less verbally, then we come to the conclusion that the shibboleth, which is a Hebrew name, and it means you know, a big slogan. So really that the shibboleth of the new, then still new occult movements, or modern occultism, as our friend Mr. Mitch Horowitz calls it, has made somewhat of a mistake. Our task, our path, our prescribed program as spiritual beings is not what we thought it was, to evolve to something higher and higher, but it is here for a different reason. Not evolution, but transformation may be the correct expression. Now, the two are quite different. We know what a Darwinian evolution is all about, you know, just various critters that come out of the swamp, little bitty bugs and things like that, and they keep evolving and they keep evolving, and then eventually they end up dinosaurs and so, and that way they die, and then something else comes forth. But in any event, the idea behind this evolve, the E in Latin usually means out of. So if I evolve, that means I am coming out of something. I evolve, I become something else. And that this is a term that no doubt with a good deal of reason, a good deal of understanding of his own science, Charles Darwin had brought forth, and it was a very not just simple, that's one thing, but a very simplistic notion that all life on Earth, due to various permutations and changes and things of that sort, over a very, very long period of time, has evolved to its present status, and perhaps it is still evolving from here. Jung said this description is not enough, because what we are really dealing with, that there is something else going on, something that is much more important and much more valuable to us than evolution, and that is transformation. Now, there is a significant difference between transformation and evolution, because well, how can I best bring this up? In my neighborhood where I lived in for years, in northern Hungary, we had one particular family of landowners, were friends of ours, of course, who cultivated silkworms. And in order to cultivate silkworms, you have to have a certain subspecies of mulberry tree, which actually has some pretty good berries if you get near it. And what happens with the mulberry tree is that it attracts silkworms, especially if you stimulate that attraction. So what the Hungarian government was doing at that time, if you asked for it, they would send you silkworm cocoons, silkworm eggs, in order to cultivate the silkworm. Why? Because they wanted to produce silk, which is probably quite understandable under the circumstances. So here you are trying to cultivate the silkworm, because the silkworm will make silk. Now, how does he make that? He does it like a number of other insects. He spins himself after a while, after he has eaten enough mulberry leaves. He eats, he makes himself, he spins himself into a cocoon. And there he sits for his preordained cocoon time. So what happens now is that the cocoon time is only so long, and after that, if all goes well, Because there are predators and things that go after the silkworms too. But then after that, out comes, from the cocoon, out comes not a worm, but an entirely different creature. It looks like a little somewhat ugly butterfly. And so these silk butterflies are flying around, and after a while, after they themselves feed quite a bit on the mulberry bushes and so forth, then they begin to spin themselves into a cocoon, somewhat similar to the ones that we mentioned before. And they sit inside the cocoon, and I presume that they sleep. I hope that they dream, because they are in there for a long time. So then finally their time comes to come out of the cocoon. And they do come out, and by now they don't look like a worm. By now they have become like that butterfly creature. They have become something else. In fact, they have changed completely from what they were in the cocoon a while before. No similarity whatsoever. They are a completely different creature. One looks like a little worm, and the other one looks like a flying creature. Now, I don't want to continue with a lesson of biology about silkworms, but let's say that the cocoon into which the silkworm spins himself is a very fine thread. It is a thread of silk. And so when you get a bunch of cocoons of silkworms into the silk factory, they have various means, chemical and otherwise, to get the silkworm out of the cocoon. And from the cocoon, they will make silk. So that is a transformation, because what has come out of the cocoon was something entirely different from what went in. That is transformation. Not a doggone thing similar. And I was somewhat interested in this, so I used to go over to these people's houses and try to watch the silkworms, even earlier, when they are still up there eating the mulberry leaves. Or when you have about 5, 6, 7 mulberry trees, and they all have the little worms on there eating, the whole thing just shakes with chewing. They are there chewing and they eat up the silk, eat up the mulberry leaves, and with their aid they come into their transformation. Now, a transformation, therefore, is a process whereby a form of life comes out radically, in a radically different form and character from the way he went in the cocoon to begin with. So it's something entirely new has been created, and that is the transformation, a formation through. Now, that is very different from any application of Darwin's theory of evolution. And it is one of my favorite subjects, but I don't want to get hung up on it. But what really happens is then eventually, if all goes well, the little fellows come out. Now they have wings and they spin silk, and then they do something else again. They now spin themselves again into a new form and sleep for a long time, and then come out of that a completely formed little butterfly-like creature. So there are, as I remember, it was a heck of a long time that I studied biology and never very much liked it. I didn't hate it as much as mathematics, but still pretty bad. But let us say, when you follow the entire process, what you are seeing is a process of transformation, not a process of evolution, where an existing biological organism grows and expands and eventually changes. But what you have here is an ongoing transformative change, where what comes out is very, very different from what went in the cocoon, but really different. Now, why am I bringing this up? Because long before Charles Darwin, whose facsimile in the form of an ape was Madame Blavatsky's and Colonel Olcott's apartment in New York. You know, he was dressed in evening dress, tails and all of that, but he was a monkey, stuffed monkey. And underneath it, Blavatsky and Olcott put a plaque saying, Charles Darwin. So we are not dealing here for a slow evolutionary change, which over generations and generations of creatures develops from a relatively simple creature into a more and more complex creature. That is evolution. But what we are dealing with here is something else. And Jung said that what we are dealing with here is obviously not evolution, but transformation, because something entirely different comes out from the one that went back in. Now, this is important. And it's important from a biological point of view, but it's also important from an occult point of view. Why? Because there is only one art, as the ancients called it, the great art, that always said that what it produces, what it is here for, is transformation. And that art is alchemy. Because when the rather lengthy and complicated alchemical process of transformation is over, what comes out is something entirely different than the ingredients, living or dead, that went in. So here is the big difference between transformation and the Darwinian evolution. Now they are not mutually exclusive, but they are something different. And so the principle of transformation is something that sort of went out of what should we call, went out of fashion around the time of the Enlightenment in the late 18th and then eventually the early 19th century. That is why the 19th, or could be a reason why the 19th century became so enraptured with evolution, because it had drawn away from the, in many ways, very, very important process of transformation. So it became sort of either or. Either you're transforming or you are evolving. And of course, the Theosophists and similar folk, my good fellow members and friends, they latched on to the word evolution. But it is my impression that that was an altogether wrong move. We are not evolving, but if we are lucky and if we do something about it, then we are transforming. So what are we transforming into? Now that's again another big, big issue. But we have the capacity of transformation because of the way we are put together. And that is where Blavatsky, in all of her books, Secret Doctrine, later books, even the esoteric teachings, it always says that, you got to realize that the human being is made out of many parts, psychically, not just physically. And that when these parts undergo certain processes of transformation, then something new comes out. And it is very different from those creatures that have come out of evolution. Now, I hope that you are not tired of this subject matter, because what we are dealing with, and what Blavatsky then continued to write about, was that we are beings that are capable of transformation, and when we transform into an increasingly spiritual being. She said, if you want to know how, she had these 7 principles that she outlined, physical, etheric, astral, lower mental, higher mental, and then after that yet some higher ones, and ultimately just really pure spirit. Now, another thing that is probably important to remember is that evolution is automatic. It just happens. But transformation can be and should be facilitated. Now I'll make a great big jump. I don't have the time or the inclination into going too much detail, but the great big jump is that Blavatsky came here in order to teach and to facilitate the transformation of the human. Not evolution. Not the evolution of the little bug or of the little dog or anything else either. But he came here in order for this transformation to occur, the human consciousness needs to be involved. We must cooperate with a developmental process that we can call transformational, and which will take us to an entirely new state of consciousness. and that the spiritual disciplines of the world, east and west, north, south, above and below, and so forth, were all concerned with how this process may be facilitated and brought to a really exciting conclusion in the end. So when you go and you study the yogas, when you go and study various other meditation exercises, Christian mysticism, the meditations and exercises of the Sufis and so forth, ultimately all they are striving at is the transformation of the nature of the individual human being, primarily the nature that psychology calls the psyche. And in that respect, Jung very early indicated that there are religions, spiritual disciplines, whatever we want to call them, which are sort of slow-moving. And then there are others that are fast-moving. I would say that at least according to their reports, whether in reality is maybe another question, the Kundalini Yoga practitioners of India are the fast-moving. They feel that they designed certain exercises whereby that transformation may proceed in a pretty fast fashion. And they explained it as it moving upwards, so it's sort of a half physical, half psychological process, but it goes up along the spinal column, and eventually, when it fully develops, comes out on the top chakra at the top of your head. So let's see, but when it comes right out, when it comes right to it, all of these various disciplines, meditational disciplines, mystical disciplines, were designed to work for, to transform, and maybe ultimately complete the transformation. And Jung said something analogous could be done by psychology. At least the psychology that he was working on, which came to be called alchemical psychology, that if certain psychological insights, knowledge, practices are perfected by an individual, then it facilitates the transformation process within that individual. And Jung didn't say that, but I think we can say it, at least I can say it if I don't get killed for it, that this was the purpose of Blavatsky's coming here, in order to teach and facilitate transformation, complete, utter transformation of the psyche. And that if we look at it that way, then we have an entirely different picture. So why? For one thing, what I noticed among my fellow occult students and fellow theosophists, that when these teachings were taught and about and believed in and so forth about evolution, that as far as I could tell, and I'm not a great master of these things, and nothing was happening. People weren't changing for the better. People weren't becoming smarter, people weren't becoming of better character, people weren't, and of course what they all want to do is, especially in these countries, want to become healthier, healthier. The great God health, who is, by the way, has a demonic character as well. Incidentally, I don't know whether you know anything about it, I just found in my desk drawer, but in a particular drawer where I haven't been looking much, a weird Tao deck. And I'll bring it out. It has a name that sounds sort of demonic to me. The object is just a bunch of cards, so you don't have to be afraid that the devils are going to come out of my office or into my office. But it's weird. I don't know. I never heard of it, and I studied a lot of books and decks and so. I don't know what the heck it is, but we'll sort of pass it around, let people sniff it and see if they sniff, you know, kind of demonic something or the other. But that's really does not pertain to our duo. It pertains in such a way that while this process of transformation takes place, and the various, now what did they call them? The part cells, the complexes are getting to know each other and unifying, because that is how the transformation takes place. While that is taking place, there are conflictual elements in the psyche. The psyche doesn't just have angels, the psyche has demons. And it's best to look out for them, because they're unpleasant company, I assure you, and so do others. If anybody had anything to do with exorcisms and things like that, so you got to watch out. But now, this being the case, what developed? While various religious developments took place in Egypt, and finally the Christians, including the Christian Gnostics, came there and so forth, the Egyptians developed certain techniques, just like the Hindus developed certain techniques, or the Mahayana Buddhists of Tibet. They developed certain techniques to facilitate, to bring about the transformation of the individual. And then, when political situation changed, you know, the Egyptians had their politics just like the Americans have their politics now. So then other people got into the act. The Greeks were always looking for something interesting and something new, and so they developed a Greco-Egyptian, but originally probably purely Egyptian discipline of alchemy. The very word is Arabic. Al is the Arabic, what do you call it? What's the matter with me? It's like, an article, an Arabic article, al-Hazard, al this, al that. That's not Al Capone, no. So that is how alchemy developed. And so when the Arabs came into Egypt and subdued Egypt and so forth, they found at least some elements of this transformational discipline there. And just because you're Arab doesn't mean that you you're not smart. So Arabian alchemists came, alchemical teachers, who knew doggone well what they were doing. They knew that what they had become heirs to from the Egyptians is a transformation of human nature, an exaltation of human nature. And this transformation in turn is, if you want to have a real description of it, just methodologically, what the alchemical transformation does is a step-by-step change in the interior psychological structure of the human being, along with perhaps some concomitant changes in the physical as well. But let's say the ancient, there is no doubt in my mind, the ancient Egyptians had developed techniques of transformation, not of the physical body. That's a blind, if you, Hatha Yoga was never considered to be the ultimate and the most important of yogas. If anything, it's a preparatory yoga to the more spiritual yogas. Why? Because reality is not material. That's why. If you want a real life, don't try to do it by diet. Don't try to do it by standing too much on your head. The chances are you're going to have a stroke if you stand on your head too much. In fact, I think I know some people who died in a fairly good age and died of a cerebral stroke, but they were doing yoga exercises for years wherein they stood on their head. Finally, their head said, "The hell with this." This is too much of a head trip. And so then they died. So you got to be careful. A physical thing will not create a spiritual thing. You might say, all right, then what about psychedelics and so forth? Well, I would say that certain powerful psychedelic substances, whether in the Amazon or whether at Harvard University, may stimulate psychological processes which are related to transformation. But they are not creators of an abiding and ongoing transformation. So here came now the science from the dark land, chem, al-chem, that which comes from chem, from the black land of Egypt, which is the black land not for any other reason, but because the river Nile spills over periodically. I think it still does it about annually, and as it spills over, it brings a particularly powerful and very, very fertile black mud out into the Nile Valley. And it's a very good soil in which to grow plants. And that is why Egypt was the chief supply of grains of the Roman Empire, and even subsequently a very, very important, fertile background. Why the British became so interested in Egypt was not because of grains, but because of something else. You know what? Cotton. That is where the best, the most prolific cotton on the face of the earth was grown. Sorry to say Tennessee, and sorry to say the American cotton growing South, but Egypt always had it. And I think to a great extent they still do. But I'm not really here to promote cotton. So let's say, you know, but they said this is the science of the black earth. These people here, they know what they, and then they develop that particular spiritual discipline. Now, if I stop here, then I leave you really hanging. What really happened was that Madame Blavatsky, and she said so, and you can find it in the present issue of Quest magazine in her letters, Madame Blavatsky had learned alchemy when she was a little girl. Her great-grandfather, Prince Dolgoruki, a very illustrious ancient Russian family, her great-grandfather had apparently what must have been one of the world's best bibliotheca. Now I'm getting all the best libraries of alchemy. And so she was reading alchemical books when she was a little girl. And then she would discuss it with her great-grandfather, with the old prince. And even later on, when they were all getting older, they were still exchanging letters with each other about the various phases of alchemy and how important they were. And God forgive me, and the masters forgive me if I'm corrupting this, but what happened was Blavatsky discovered early in her youth that the human being is capable of transformation, and that if she addressed herself to that task with a great deal of energy, and she found all the various sources about that subject, and she would learn how to practice and how to teach transformation of the psyche, then she would promote the salubrious transformation of the human race. Now, obviously there are, and I'm going to have to stop at that point soon, obviously there are various practices. People come up with various practices. I see yoga practices, one thing or the other, that work in that direction of transformation. But there are others. And that's why Madame Blavatsky did not, contrary to what some people feel, Madame Blavatsky did not come here to promote Hindu or other kind of distant practices for transformation. She came to facilitate transformation by all means that she found available. And that is why even Dr. Annie Besant, who wore a sari most of the second half of her life and things like that, they didn't become Hindus, you know. And their yoga practices were more of an alchemical nature than any other. And so, by way primarily of the alchemical discipline, the transformational process was called attention to by H.P. Blavatsky, and her teachings were all designed to facilitate that particular process. Now, if you now ask me, okay, where is the alchemy that I can be transformed with? I will say, it's right in here, inside of you. Because there is something there that is like the little silkworm. It wants to grow wings, spiritual wings. It wants to become something else than it is. Something better, something greater, something wiser, something having a better character, and ultimately become so transformed, because after all that we are talking about, that it will have the entry ticket to heaven, whatever you want to call it. And that is a very different view from the worship of evolution. Not that evolution does not exist. Sure. I am sure that dachshund, which by the way, they had dachshunds in Egypt, that right there makes me favorable to the Egyptians. But let's say, obviously there were processes, but they were for the most part what Jung already quite early in his career called individuation. Now, that needs to be, and I'll just give that little explanation because most of you know it anyway. The individuation is there because it is to create what in German, and already in Latin, it comes from Latin, we call an individuum. And an individuum is an indivisible being. The chief character that the ancient ascribed to the transformed, individuated being, the one who in alchemy then has within himself the philosopher's stone, was in that manner that they are now themselves. So individuation is self-realization, self-development, becoming one's true, authentic, ancient, transcendental self. And if that is not an objective of every theosophist and of every Rosicrucian, then I don't think what the heck they are talking about. Because that, if you don't mind me putting it that way, that is where it's at. It's not in Atlantis, it's not in Lemuria where the lemur monkeys jump around, but it is inside of you. So, if that is understood, then we can see that everything in the secret doctrine, for instance, is a preparation for this kind of a transformation. Then you say, well, what about the masters? What about the masters? Well, it seems that when this alchemical process of transformation gets to certain levels, certain points in the human psyche, then there appear dream figures, real figures, there appear fantasy figures, as Jung called them at one time, who fall in line with the alchemical process that the human is engaged in, and thereby facilitate that alchemical transformation. The alchemists knew that. They said that when you have gone on with your alchemy, and when you have seen Elijah Elias Artista, as he was called by the alchemists. When you have seen Elijah, then you found the one who will teach you real alchemy. All right, Elijah. Do I care whether it's Elijah or Kuthumi or anybody else? No. But as long as somebody is there helping you in an effective manner, that is what is important. So it was already present in alchemy that, let's say, figures, images, beings, whatever you wish to call them, will appear in the course of the alchemical transformation of the individual, because what was it maybe Meyer, the great alchemist, one of them said, therefore be ye all philosophers' stones. Namely, it means we are to be transformed. And in order for us to be transformed, these helpers, figures, sort of angelic beings may appear. But when that's overdone, that master worship is overdone, then I draw a line. Because it can be overdone, and I've seen it overdone. But the fact of the matter is that when you are moving the right way in your own transformation, help will come. And what greater and what better promise can there be? But the Sanat Kumara from the Gobi Desert will come. I don't know who he is, it's a name, Lord Sanat. So these things are not as helpful as people make them out to be, because it must be experienced inside of you, because it is inside of you already, but by cultivating it by various effective means, by the alchemy that still can be practiced, you will be transformed, you will be a living philosopher's stone, and you will be placed into the crown of the King of Heaven. So I thank you very much. I hope that is that indicate that this is a very different way of looking at the occult universe. But is it really so difficult? No, different. It isn't. It's just different words and different concepts that have been attached to it, but all of it has to do with the change, the individuation, the becoming of our true self. So we may look at that, and I wanted you at least to see something nice and stimulating about alchemy. This is a very recent, you can come in here, this is a very recently published book on alchemy with wonderful illustrations, and the author is David Brafman, who is the curator of the alchemical collection at the Getty Museum, and with whom we had all kinds of dealings, because we managed to, years ago, we managed to talk him into buying the alchemical collection of Manly Palmer Hall for the Getty. My late friend Roger Weir and I worked on that for long periods of time, and finally it happens, and now it is there. They know how to deal with these artifacts. But in any event, this is a very beautiful book, and also has some very good content. But if you look at it from and there's so many things that could be said. Or maybe, I don't know, have we put out a program for February yet? It is there. Okay, well, then we'll go on with that. But in any event, this is, I think, a very important recognition of alchemy being the Western mode of transformation. And after he had already secretly written the Red Book and things like that, Jung wrote no less than 5 big volumes about alchemy, beginning with psychology and alchemy. But if you want to see the process of transformation nice graphically represented, then get the one with the very prosaic title, The Psychology of the Transference. It has, which contains the, which in Latin is called the Rosarium Philosophorum, the rosary of the philosophers, meaning because there are 10 individual pictures in it, the 10 levels of transformation, and in the end we have the glorious Empress who combines the king and the queen of before, and it's finished. You know, so very, very beautiful stuff to look at. We have it somewhere in I think in photographs, and I have it also in transparency somewhere, so I'll bring it. It's a medieval codex which has the 10 individual pictures of how the alchemical transformation takes place. This, of course, all symbolic. So it starts with a king and a queen, who is also known as salt and sulfur and various ones. King and the queen meeting each other, and then they undergo a long process of interaction and love affair, and they even die in the course of that, and then they come back. But at the 10th, the very last one, then the alchemist says, and now the noble Empress is born, and here she has 2 heads, she has wings, she is a transcendental, transfigured being. That is in the Psychology of the Transference, which I think is an alchemical codex that probably any one of Jung's probably Yolanda Jacobi had discovered and brought to him, and then he wrote that book. Or it was the other one, other lady, great disciple, whose name will come to me tonight when I'm alone at home and when I can't tell anybody. But anyway, so you see, we have our transformational discipline, and it is called alchemy. And of course there are many books, many codices, many figures, many stages of transformation, but they are all really working for the total spiritual oneness, unification of the human, and that is what it is. So if we look at that, I think even though we are not alchemists, and many of the alchemical substances, smell real bad. We had an alchemist at Philosophical Research Society, and when he was doing his concoction, the stuff smelled awful. So I wouldn't want to be in that particular laboratory, but the fact is true that there are, and we will come back to alchemy again, there are definite stages of transformation. Some of them are characterized by color, and some of them are characterized by other substances, but these are the medieval and earlier forms of what Jung called individuation. And if you ask me in conclusion, and I'm not going to answer as to where did Jung get that individuation, then I will whisper into your ear, he got it from his experiences in the Red Book. He underwent a spiritual alchemy of major proportion there, which had given him a fantastic beginning on the path of individuation or transformation or whatever we may wish to call it. I think it is very important. I think we have neglected, except for a few people, we have neglected the parallel with alchemy, and that is really much, much more important than so many stuff of various disciplines that have been heaped upon us, many of which are not terribly helpful. Ernest Wood, who was a teacher of yoga since he was very, very young, said that most Western people are not qualified for the deeper forms of yoga. And that was his own. He knew it. So, however, I think that maybe we might profit from the study and the contemplation just to look at the pictures, and you look at it in this alchemy book. I mean, it takes you into another world. It's just incredible. And this is written by a contemporary scholar of alchemy, and also very good descriptions as well. Anyway, that is the great discovery that Blavatsky really brought her form of alchemy in the world, and all the other things that she was teaching were organized in such a way that they constellate themselves around this alchemy. And I think that ultimately is much more helpful, especially for people in the West, than anything else. So a little new keynote here, and God willing, if I can shuffle around for a while here longer, then maybe I'll do more on this subject. Because I was always aware of the importance of alchemy with the article, with the letters, Blavatsky's letters in the latest quest. I think there is the answer. She was attracted to alchemy way back by her great-grandfather, and she practiced and taught that alchemy in various disguises till the end of her days, which was much sooner than it should have been. Okay, thank you very much, and we'll come back tomorrow.